Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to discuss with you guys and just talk about our evolving homeschool journey over the last 6 years. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I've talked about this roller coaster ride that we have had for our previous 6 years of homeschooling. We had a couple of really rough homeschool years where I started questioning why I was even homeschooling, debating whether or not if we'd made a mistake, if we should send our kids to a public school, just really questioning everything, really feeling defeated at the end of every day. And when we got to that point, I just finally came to the conclusion that something had to change. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of assessing kind of the struggles in our own homeschool, the triggers that made us have bad days, just really assessing everything that was going on, doing a lot of research. And I finally came to the conclusion that I needed to let my kids lead in some areas, and we really needed to follow some of their interests. So this is where it all started. We were on vacation in the summer of 2019, and we went to Mammoth Cave. And with all national parks or wherever you are, you have to take a trip into the gift shop, right? So we were in the gift shop, perusing around, looking for a magnet. We get a magnet wherever we go. And my oldest son comes up and he brings me this book. He wants this book. It's a bird field guide. And I'm like, why in the, no. It wasn't really even that expensive, but in my mind, it was just going to be a book that would be enjoyed for 1, maybe 2 days. We'd take it home. It would sit on a bookshelf and it would collect dust for all eternity after that. Super cool book. Lots of great figures, excellent pictures, just very interactive. But I was like, when have you ever wanted to study birds? So I said no. But we were on vacation with grandparents. But grandparents rarely ever say no. Or at least their grandparents rarely say no. So obviously we have this book, so you know that grandparents bought this book for him. And honestly, this is where it all started. This is where our interest-led learning started, a National Geographic field guide about birds. So I have absolutely no idea what happened, what sparked the interest in my oldest Gabriel when he got this book, but he devoured it. He read every single word out of this book. He could tell me stats, the migration patterns, the diets, the amount of eggs, the common traits. He could look at a bird and tell me what it was. This is not an exhaustive book by any means, but it had a lot of birds that we were going to be seeing, in North America, the common ones. And he was just reading everything. It's got little fun facts and little things all over. And, 1 second he's telling us, did you know this? And did you know this? And did you know that? And we didn't, of course. We, could spot out a couple of birds, but he was quickly becoming our bird guide because he just devoured this book. He could tell us anything and everything about these books, these birds, because he read everything and he retained it. He was, for some reason, just drawn to this book, and it just lit a fire in him. And what's funny about it is it lit this fire in him, but then that just bled over into everyone else. All of a sudden, his siblings were interested in birds, and all of a sudden, Joel and I were interested in birds. Grandparents were interested in birds. Aunts and uncles, friends were interested in birds. Everyone around us became keenly aware that we were interested in birds and somehow just kind of took this same interest along with them. Now, this all started over vacation, like I mentioned, over the summer. And as I was getting ready to plan for our upcoming school year, I knew that somehow birds needed to be incorporated into our learning. Somehow, some way, birds just needed to be a part of it. So I sat down and just kind of made this map, if you will, how can I incorporate birds into all of these different subjects? And when I looked at it, I made a list of all these different ways that I can incorporate it. I won't remember. I made a quick list. Let's see. So I said we could cover science with birds. We could cover geography, a shop class, if you will, art, photography, engineering, reading and writing, PE, which would have been through like hiking and nature walks, and obviously just using lots of observation skills. So when I kind of like graphed out all these things and just started figuring out, okay, how can I incorporate birds into this, I was able to incorporate it in lots of different ways, surprising to myself, like as to how well I can incorporate it into learning. And you want to know the best part about doing this is that my kids never actually thought that they were learning. They were enjoying birds, and this was a natural interest of theirs. So this was never, it was never like pulling teeth to get them to do this or to do that. When it was about birds, it was something that they genuinely wanted to do. Learning was not a chore, and that was something that we needed for our homeschool. Everything seemed to be a chore to them. They didn't want to do it. They weren't interested. It was me leading the learning, and all of a sudden when it was their interest, they were happy to oblige. They didn't even know they were learning when they were. And what's funny is that they were learning. My kids are a testament to that. When they can rattle off all these birds and where they migrate to and what they eat and what they prefer and how big their eggs are and all these things that even I am still learning because of them, they learned it without worksheets and without tests. Shocking, right? We can learn without tests and we can learn without worksheets. So now I just want to share just a little bit of how I covered these different topics to give you an idea of maybe how you could incorporate it. It doesn't have to be birds. You can take any subject, and if you just start figuring out, okay, how could we study the history of this? How could we make this into science? How could we make this into writing or reading? There are a ton of ways to explore lots of different subjects that don't necessarily involve a textbook and tests. So science is an easy one, right? We covered science with the birds. Birds was actually just our science for all year. And so how do we cover it? Mostly we were just reading about birds. We were reading about their diet and their weight and their migration patterns, how many eggs they had, how big the eggs were, what did the eggs look like, any special features they had. Could they fly? Did they not fly? Can they float or can they not? How do they hunt or what do they eat? We read their scientific names. Really, anything that we were reading and learning about birds obviously could just follow under this entire umbrella of science. Next, that kind of leads us to geography. So geography is an easy one to relate with birds, and that we can study their migration patterns. So we were looking at a lot of maps and seeing where birds would migrate to. Where can we find birds? There are a lot of birds that my kids want to see, and they're like, oh man, we can't see that one because they're in South America. Or, oh, we can't see that one because it's in Louisiana. There were lots of birds that led us to a map to look and find, okay, well, where, if we want to see this bird, where would we have to go in order to see it? Or, oh, we're not going to see it because we're going to be there in the winter and they migrate to a different place during the winter. And we were just constantly looking at maps in relationship to birds and their locations and their migration patterns. And one special occasion, we went to Mississippi on a vacation, and we went to the Mississippi Sandhill Crane National Wildlife Refuge. I might have gotten that name wrong. It was really long. They have this park in Mississippi that's devoted to helping the Mississippi Sandhill crane like bring up their numbers. Like the numbers of those birds were starting to decline, and so they were building this refuge to kind of support their life and give them enough of the land that they needed in order to survive. And so we went to this refuge while we were on vacation, and we were able to see these Mississippi Sandhill cranes. They're type of sandhill crane that's only found in like this general area in Mississippi, and they don't migrate and they stay there year round. And so we were actually able to see a few of the Mississippi sandhill cranes that are just like in this tiny little pocket in Mississippi. Kids loved it and had a blast. But that was another example of taking geography, taking birds. We're on vacation and we meshed the two together. So I mentioned that we brought in shop class, and we just simply were making bird feeders and bird houses and learning about tool safety and, you know, how to properly use different tools, different things like that. So they were able to help with their dad building these different things, and even making their own with just little scrap pieces of wood. So we brought in shop class and using tools into our, you know, journey of learning about birds. Now, we even brought in art, and art is obvious, right? We're just going to draw birds. And so each of the kids just had, like, here's Gabriel's, his bird sketches, and honestly, they have so many pictures about birds. I won't show you all of them, but here we you know, He's drawing a bird feeder with a cardinal, a blue jay, starting to draw a bald eagle. Let's see. He has lots of different ones. And what is that one? A barred owl, another eagle. So they just go on and on. The kids had tons of pictures of birds everywhere. I was constantly finding loose leaf until finally I just got them a sketchbook to keep all of their pictures together. But they would watch videos on Art for Kids Hub of how to draw birds. They would look at pictures in books and would just kind of study the picture and transfer it over into their own drawing. So they were just perfecting their skill of art. Obviously an easy one to bring into anything that you want to learn. You can always draw it. Another thing that I mentioned was photography. So one of my little side things that I like to do is I like to take pictures, and so we have some relatively nice cameras, and I was letting the kids take our cameras, put on the zoom lens, and then also just try and take pictures of birds. When we were on vacation, they constantly had them on and would snap pictures of different things, learning the ins and out of a camera and how to take good pictures, and sometimes being disappointed when their pictures didn't come out and explaining to them why that happened. So we were working on some photography skills. I mentioned engineering and building, and basically what I meant with this is that our kids, who also love Legos, built a ton of like bird replicas with Legos without any instructions. I don't know about anyone else. I'm really good with Legos when I have directions. I am awful at building things when I don't have directions, but my kids sometimes just thrive on it. And so some of the things that they were able to build with Legos shocked me in their ability to, think of a bird, build a bird with Legos. It was amazing. But they were able to do that, and that was one thing that I chalked up. Okay, wow, you really thought about this. You really, took an idea and ran with it, and you made a bird out of Legos. Something I could never have been able to do. And reading is another easy one that you can do with any interest, but we found books upon books upon books about birds. We were getting tons of books from the library. We were buying our favorites. We were doing picture books. We were doing like encyclopedias, and then also some read alouds. We were doing books like as simple as this for some of the kid ones, kind of like a Dr. Seuss kind of book. We were doing read alouds. Kids loved My Side of the Mountain. If you haven't read this one, I would highly suggest it. Super good. And we're even reading right now, as we finish out the summer before we start our new year, we're reading The Trumpet of the Swan, and they're loving this one too. But we're taking good classic literature, we're reading it, and it's all about birds. We just did a quick search, led us to some books. But we're also reading, the kids are reading. They devour things like this. They love this. So over the course of the year, we have come to be the proud owners of a lot of bird books. We kind of could open a little library. So we got Birds of Ohio. If you do like birds or you're looking for a bird guide, these are great little starter ones, especially if you want to get ones for your state. It goes over the birds that you're going to find in each state, and they even break them down by color. So there's like a little color box up there at the top. So if you're looking for a bird of that color, you can kind of go and maybe try to figure out what you saw. So we had several guides. We were, out and about constantly. They liked this one as well. You can even tell some of our books have taken a beating because we have used them a lot to look up different kinds of birds. We have also been the recipient of a lot of people gifting us things when they find out that we love birds. We've had a lot of families just be so blessing us with things. So this is a super fun book of bird songs. And so each page has a number and a picture, and then you can just find the number. Let's see here. I don't know what kind of bird that was, but it matches whatever number 189 is. So the kids loved, I have to figure out how to stop that one. Okay. The kids loved to listen to this one. They became very good listeners for the different bird calls, and would kind of shock me in how well they could remember the different bird calls, because a lot of times I would not have any idea what I was hearing. That's a fun one. We also have just this huge bird visual guide. Super, super great pictures. It's a huge book, but has just lots of beautiful photographs. Again, they loved this one. But yeah, we have a ton of books about birds. So that would be an easy one. Whatever subject you're wanting to study, you can easily find books about that topic, whether they're, true or, just fun read alouds or even picture books. I'm sure that there's just something out there. It's amazing what people have written about because the possibilities are endless. So with writing, on the other side of reading, we also did writing. And what we did, my oldest was, I've mentioned in our curriculum before that we do IEW, and that allows us to write papers about lots of different topics. And so a lot of our papers were about birds. And it was fine because he thought that that was fun. He was enjoying learning about birds. So the papers were not a chore to him because he already knew a lot of the stuff about birds, so he enjoyed putting it down on paper. Some of them were fiction, some of them were nonfiction, but he still had fun. Another thing is that we made a bird log. This one has seen better days. But my husband just quickly pulled this thing up, and because we had made bird houses and bird feeders, we made up this bird log because they were wanting to, for a while, we weren't getting any birds. We were getting 0 birds at our bird feeder, and so every once in a while we'd be so lucky to get 1 bird or maybe 2, and so we started a bird log where we were tracking what birds came to what feeder and at what time, and we were just trying to see if we could find any common times that they were going to come. Was it a male or a female? Were they on the tube feeder, the house feeder, or on the tray or the suet? I mean, lots of different things that the kids just had fun tracking for a while. As you can see that's kind of died off. We haven't finished this one, but that's also because we have a ton of birds now and it's hard to keep track of them. But it was a lot of fun in the beginning when we had 0 birds and we were trying to attract birds to our feeder. I also said that we covered PE, and this is another easy one. We were taking lots of nature walks. We were going to metro parks. We were tracking down bald eagles' nests. We were tracking down osprey nests. I even had a video where we took a bike ride to go find an osprey nest. I mean, we were just out and about all the time. We were constantly outside in the metro parks with our binoculars. Yes, we have lots of different kinds of binoculars as well because we became birders as a family. And I said we were using observation skills, and you would find this in all of them because anytime that you're looking at a bird, whether or not you want to write about it or draw about it or to figure out what bird you're even looking at, you need to be able to have good observation skills. So we were using our binoculars and we were jotting notes down or drawing them in a nature journal, or we were just noting them, we were just using those observation skills to figure out what bird we were actually looking at. We use observation skills all day, every day. We were just explicitly putting them to use to look and study birds. One of the ways that I wanted to share that we used it is we have an app here. So it's called the Cornell Lab Merlin, and it helps you ID birds when you're kind of out and about. And so you can you can start a bird ID, you can explore birds, get a photo ID, and use Merlin to help you identify. So if you just click start bird ID, then you would choose your location and when you would see the bird, and then it kind of gets you to this, like, well, what size was the bird? We'll say it was, robin sized. And then it says, okay, well, what were its main colors? Let's say black and red. And where was it? Was it eating at a feeder? Where was it? Did you see it in the sky, on the ground? We'll say it was on the ground. Okay, and then it comes up with some options. It could have been an American robin. It could have been a red-winged blackbird. It could be a cardinal. And all these, and so you would choose, like, you want to hear it. So what's a red-winged blackbird? Maybe you heard it, so you want to hear you would click on this button. And so you would be able to determine, okay, well, was that the bird that I heard? And it allowed you to go through some just different observation skills of trying to identify different birds. So when we were out on our walks, a lot of times to use when we would hear a call and we wanted to figure out, I can't see the bird, but I want to know what that was based on the call. We kind of maybe had a couple ideas of what we thought it would be, and we would go and search it, listen to the call, and determine whether or not that was the bird that we heard. But this is a super cool app. If you are interested in birds and you want to use it, we really do enjoy the Merlin Cornell Lab app. Now, we did some other fun stuff that just kind of were extras. They were the cherries on top, and I just kind of jotted some things down. We went to the National Aviary. So in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there is the National Aviary with tons of birds. Went there with a couple of friends, explored. Kids had a blast. Would highly recommend going. We got lots of games that we would use during our school year. So we have, for our younger kids, they like to play this match a pair of birds. And what's interesting is that the birds don't actually look exactly alike. So it was teaching you that the male and the female actually look different when you're talking about a cardinal. And so they had to learn to find not necessarily one that looked exactly the same, but they were looking for the male and female version of the same kind of bird, which was fun. We have a Lord of the Wings. It's kind of the same company maker here. A bird trump game. So kind of like an idea of like war where you're competing against things. They liked this one, but it helps learn a lot of facts because each of the birds, of course, I pull out all the direction cards. So here's an example, an Arctic tern. And then it has the little facts underneath it. And they were all different birds. So you might say you were comparing the wingspan, and whoever's bird has the biggest wingspan would be the winner. So we were playing games like that, but they would quickly pick up on the birds that had the biggest wingspan or had the biggest eggs, things like that. And another one that we got was Birdopoly. I don't know if you knew it, but Monopoly has like every version of like anything out there and made it into a Monopoly game. Well, they have a Birdopoly too. So my kids love to play Birdopoly. We would also go to our Metro Park bird events. They would have different events at different parks where you could go bird watching. They would kind of take you on some walks to help you find different kinds of birds. They would have events where you could make little bird feeders that were, you know, the seeds around a pine cone, things like that that you would take home. Lots of different fun events that we went to just to explore around our own city. We had things like bird calendars where we had a bird a day. We also have one hanging up that's just one, you know, your typical hanging calendar with a picture. But they love this one. They love seeing what different birds, and these are from all over the world. So a lot of times this ends up leading us to figure out when it's a very exotic bird, going back to geography and seeing, okay, well, where would I actually find this bird? Because a lot of times it won't tell you where it is. That's one thing that we actually were sad about on this one, is that it doesn't give you any facts or any location about these birds, but still fun because the birds are beautiful. We also went to our own zoo aviary, super fun. I think we went a couple times and just spent almost our entire time in the aviary that we were in the zoo. We would also take time to study birds in scripture and find where we could find different birds mentioned in scripture. And so that became kind of a fun game of where can we find a bird scripture or bird reference in scripture. We also went to a raptor center where they were kind of rehabilitating some injured birds. So we saw lots of owls and bald eagles and different raptors that they had there. And a lot of times they have speakers there who are more than happy to bring out some of the animals and just kind of talk on them. So we got to learn lots of facts about different kinds of owls when we went to the raptor center that was near us. And then another event that we went to is we just happened upon it. We were at a Renaissance festival and they had a falconry show. So we were able to watch, and even the kids at the end were able to actually hold the falcons at the end. So they loved that. Now, That seems like a lot of stuff, right? I mean, it is a lot of stuff. We have to remember we did this over the course of over a year. We have been doing birds for a while now, and we didn't get all those books in one day. I mean, as you saw, like, it started with this book, and I was almost certain that it was going to lead nowhere. But we have just accumulated these things over time through gifts, through birthday gifts, different things like that, because we knew that the interest wasn't going away, and we figured it would be better to, fan the flame rather than try and put it out. And in the end, our kids were always engaged, and they were always wanting more. Every time we came to a new bookstore and they saw a new book about birds, they're like, can we get it? Can we get it? Can we get it? And when your kids are learning and they're enjoying it, it's really, really hard to say no. So you may have a child that has a special interest, and it may not be birds, and then that's totally okay. You do not have to replicate what I have done here. I am here to encourage you that if your child does have a special interest, to fan that flame. Just ignite it. Let them take off with something. You will be amazed at what your kids will pick up, what they will retain, and what they will enjoy learning about when their hearts are actually in it. And you don't have to go all out right at the beginning. Like I said, I didn't get all these things right at the beginning. It was over a course of time. Just start small. Start with one book. When they find something that they love, get them one thing. See what they do with it. And then from there, just kind of build up. And I encourage you to think outside the box. When I thought of studying birds, I did not have all of this in mind. I didn't know that all of these things existed. A little research went a long way as seeing what was out there. And sometimes we just stumbled onto things like the falconry show at the Renaissance Festival. We didn't set out to go see that. We just happened upon it. But if you do a little bit of research, you do the legwork, you will be amazed at how you can tie things in. Because it also led to some history. When we saw the falconry show at the Renaissance Festival, it led us into studying medieval falconry and how falconers would use falcons for hunting and things like that. And so it led us into history. It's amazing where when you're studying something, how it can just completely spread out in all these different directions, and you can take it just about anywhere. So think outside the box, find different ways that you can incorporate learning, even if it is disguised. As a parent, there's nothing better than watching your kids devour things and be willing participants. So if you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them. If you've done something similar, I would love to hear about it. We are kind of moving away from birds slowly and kind of entering a new season of a new interest in our lives. So I'd love to hear what your kids love, how you incorporate the things that they love into their learning. And until next time, guys, have a blessed day.